What's going on, everybody? My name is Nick.
My name is Dave.
And this is the Deep Dive, and we're back, Dave. It's good to be back in action.
Yeah.
I feel like we kind of have been going back and forth. We had the DS, which was awesome, last week on the podcast, but I'm glad to get back here with you and to jump back into this. And we're in a kind of a season of doing a couple one-offs before we jump into our next series. And today's sermon was "The Tongue is a Fire," and it was a cool sermon about kind of taming the tongue. How to use your words for good and not for deceit and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's a sermon. I feel like I know I have preached very similar sermons before, and I'm sure many in the congregation have heard similar sermons. About once every 2 years, we need to be reminded of this. It wasn't anything that was like earth-shattering. I think people had all heard the scripture and the advice that comes from it, but putting it into practice is not as easy, so we kind of looked at that.
Absolutely.
To be reminded. Sometimes we just need to be reminded.
I think in our faith, sometimes going back to the basics is one of the most kind of important thing we can do, is just kind of remind, sometimes I think we always get too in the weeds with some stuff, and we just need to remember some of the basic things. But I'm actually excited to kind of dive more into it and all that good stuff, so let's get ready. You ready?
Let's get started.
Well, Dave, I kind of wanted to start with, you kind of mentioned it in this service, just talking about the hurricane and all that stuff. And I just wanted to see if you would kind of share with them what kind of UMCOR has, what they kind of do a little bit, and then how, if somebody wants to contribute to that cause, to go to some of the victims.
Yeah, because it was a devastating storm, and we really... best words I could say is dodged a bullet here, because what is happening in other places could have easily happened here.
Mm-hmm. It was forecasted to happen.
Yeah,
here.
it was, but for the route that it took. And so those places where it went through from Florida all the way up into Western North Carolina, even Tennessee and places like that, some of them are wiped to rebuild. I know of four United Methodist churches in the Augusta area that have severe damage that they're going to have to rebuild. And that's not even talking about the homes, and, power's going to be out for extended time. So people are really struggling. And I know, they certainly need our prayers, and, there may be other tangible ways that we can support. But, a lot of what they need probably is money right now. And one of the best organizations that I know of is the United Methodist Committee on Relief. We always lift that one up whenever there is a natural disaster. We've responded as a congregation many times through that. And so if people want to give to that, and you may have another organization you want to give to, and that's fine. But I can tell you this is a very good one. With essentially no administrative cost.
Yep.
The administration for UMCOR comes from another place in the United Methodist budget. So if you're giving to the Hurricane Helene relief, you can be assured that it's all going.
Yeah, your money's going to where it needs to go.
And they're also they're a very proactive organization. They're either working with other organizations or themselves are some of the first boots on the ground. So they're there and they're working and they're bringing relief. So it's a great organization. You can do that through our church in the same way that you would give. You can give a check to our church, but just put in the memo Hurricane Helene. Whether it's a check or whether you do it online, we'd be happy to receive that, and we'll be doing all that we can. There may be other things that we may get a mission team together. I don't know where this is leading. I know it's very personal to me. I have a son who lives in Asheville, and they're not really sure what they're faced with right now. I mean, they haven't gotten back to their house yet. So we'll see where this leads. But it was very devastating storm with lots of harm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, continued thoughts and prayers for all those impacted or people who know people who were impacted. There's just as you said, it was devastating for several communities, and as people who were fortunate on our side, the least we can do is toss a few bucks their way or to go out and help remove some trees at some point, and and all that good stuff. Basically giving back to what God's
And
given
that's not to say that there wasn't people that suffered here.
Sure.
Because I do know there were some pockets here in Cherokee County that had some pretty bad things that happened with limbs and flooding and some power outages, but nothing like it could have been, and nothing approaching what it has been in other regions.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for the outpouring of love and support and donations for those people who are devastated by Hurricane Helene. Because of the overwhelming response that we have, we're going to continue to be a collection center at least through this Sunday coming up. And so please continue to bring the items. You can see the list attached to this video. And if you come after hours, you can leave your donations just here under the portico. If you come during business hours, there'll generally be somebody here to help you with the unloading. Thank you again for your support.
Well, Dave, let's kind of transition and let's kind of talk a little bit about your sermon. Like I said, it was talking about kind of taming the tongue. So why don't you?
Right. Yeah.
Break it up
So
for us?
as I said in the intro, it kind of comes around. It's something because we all talk a lot, we all communicate a lot. Nowadays, a lot of posting online, sharing text and email, and that sort of things, and just sort of self-control of like how we use our words. I started out with this phrase that everybody knows: "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me," which is a fallacy. That's not true.
Yeah.
And I was trying to unpack it and be fair to that phrase. I mean, and I can think of as a leader, people, and you're a leader too. I mean, people are going to say things about you.
Yep.
People are just going to talk about it. So, it's just like, don't let those words discourage you, but the fact is they do.
Yeah.
They do. And it may not be like somebody punching you in the face, but it really can be punching in the gut.
Yeah.
And so,
and I that is something I have struggled with a lot in my leadership, is because I'm a one of my like love language type things is like words of affirmation, so words mean a lot to me, in true intention behind those words. So when somebody says something, sometimes it takes me a while of like really working through like, okay, was this about me, or was this a frustration from something else and I was attaching it just takes a lot to work through. So words really can have a major impact on.
And I was thinking, actually, here's an example. I didn't use it in the service, but on Cherokee Connect this week, someone who was looking for preschools put out, "How is the Hickory Flat United Methodist Church preschool?" And there were dozens, maybe hundreds of great things, people saying, "We love the preschool. It's the most wonderful place. My kids just loved it. And we were so sad when we had to leave," and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
One comment that I saw, I don't know if you saw this one. Somebody put, "Well, we went there 18 years ago and didn't love it." And so, like, why did that bother me?
Yeah.
It's like I wanted to respond like 18 years ago. Are you kidding? But that's the kind of thing that words can do, because we can hear 99 times these words of affirmation, and one thing come along, and if it's done in a harmful way, it could do a number on us.
Yeah, it can really. I don't know why the negative has so much more weight than the positive tends to.
And that's just the way we're wired up as human beings. And I think it's why what the Bible is speaking to, because lots of times our response can be anger or to toss more toxicity back into it.
Yeah.
And the person who posted that, I mean, I think she might even said, "Well, it might have changed over 18 years. Well, clearly it's changed over 18 years ago. And I don't know what happened 18 years ago. I'm sorry. But,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so, and sometimes people might offer something that they really did not mean it the way that it was received. And so that's just why we have to be so careful with the way that we say things.
I did have a little fun with that thread. I posted in there, "I hear the guy who does chapel every so often is really great."
Yeah, I saw that.
Got a few comments. So
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Yeah, but but because there are times when there's misunderstandings, but I think there are more times when it's been a response out of anger. And that is a human, because it just puts us back on our heels and makes us defensive if somebody says something that threatens us.
Sure.
And so we kind of get in that fight or flight. And it's in those moments that we can say things that can cause harm and damage relationships.
Yeah.
And say things that, not that they can't ever be, restored, but certainly will set it back.
Yeah.
And, I think of, things that I've done and said,
I've heard a guy, I heard a speaker, I forgot who said it, but he was talking about trust and how in our communications, sometimes when we lose trust in people, that he said to think of it like a bucket. And when you've lost that trust, it's like just pouring out that bucket.
Yeah.
But then when you put it back, all that trust is re-earned from just drops of water. These little things that will eventually add up to where that bucket could be full again. But you lose things through bad communication, through things where you don't trust people way faster than you can get it back.
Yeah.
So it's sort of be careful.
And I'm not saying or suggesting, and I hope that this came clear, and I'll have a whole point about this later.
Yeah.
But that we don't have to ever say and address things that could be perceived in negative ways, or they are negative.
Yeah.
There is some truth that needs to be spoken into a situation, but the way that we say it, I've had people say some really hard things to me in ways that devastated me. I've had people say some very hard things to me in ways that they were hard to hear, but they were said in a way that I could receive it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That I knew that the person had my best interest and was presenting, hey, we need to fix these things. And so, I mean, that makes all the difference in how we choose to use the words that we say.
Yeah.
One of the areas that I talked about, it used to be just, and also because words, so much of our language and our communication is nonverbal, but we're in this era, which is the thing, and it's going to be with us, where so much communication happens electronically.
Yeah.
And so that runs the risk of being misunderstood, because there's not we don't know what's going on with that person at the time that they might have posted something. They might have not meant it a lot. I'll tell you something that happened to me one time. There was a woman in our church, and she was going through a surgery, and so she said, I think I might have even been in the car. This is illegal, but I know it was in a place where I really could not respond, but I felt like I needed to say something.
Right.
And so she had. It said, surgery went well, and I think it was a long text about that. And I said, oh, I'm so glad to hear. Well, she got her feelings hurt because I did not put several sentences there, and I really didn't mean. I really, was thankful to hear that, and I just didn't have the time or the phone. I couldn't pick up the phone, and so that those are considerations too. That sometimes we, in our brevity, can not communicate the whole, and the fact that we don't have the backstory or the body language, to communicate
I think texts have a hard time deciphering the other things that are happening.
Yeah.
And we kind of anticipate it. I think we have expectations of us being the only thing that's happening when a text is being sent, or we're being intentionally thoughtful every time. Or email or digital communication at some level, but sometimes it's hard. I've had a lot of times where my words will get mixed up, like the way I say it is just the way I thought it, but it wasn't necessarily mean or abrupt or something like that, but somebody would have taken it that way.
Well, and sometimes when people are already on the defensive, they are looking for something, and so I think when we have to really take a beat and choose our words carefully. Because we can be misunderstood. But I think really what I'm driving at is all of that, I think, is just part of the grace that goes along with it. Sure. But I think that really what I was stressing, and what the longer scripture text that we looked at this morning was addressing, was when it's not that way. Mm-hmm. when our words are intended to be missiles our darts.
Yep.
And so, the text goes into and reminds us that, the tongue is like a fire, and it's like a little spark can start a huge, forest fire.
Yeah.
And so I think that's when we have to have some practices, that we thought about before we get in those points, because things are going to happen.
Yeah.
People are going to say things that are going to offend us. So how do we respond in those moments?
Right.
Do we anger, frustration? Do we say something just out of our own pain and hurt, and not something that's going to bring about grace or hope or any kind of restoration?
Sure.
Kind of stuff.
Yeah. You asked a question about, like, have you ever written an angry email and then maybe sat on it or whatever? And I've done that a couple times myself. And, a lot of times I'd write it and I'd read it. I'm like, this isn't even me. Like, like when you go back and read it, because I like to write it out, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to sleep on it. And then I come back to it the next day.
That's a good practice.
Like that's what I try to do.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% effective. I think I'm probably 85, 90%. Like I feel like I'm decent at it, but there have still been times where I've just launched it. But I have tried to make it a practice to write it, get it out, and then come back to it in the morning and then reread it and go, okay, this is not going to be heard the way I think it'll be heard, or this isn't serving the justice that I feel that needs to be served isn't going to happen. You know what I mean? So,
well, in those cases, what I have done, and I have learned, because particularly I think in the early days of email, because I go back to all that. I mean, it was so easy just to get angry and fire off something, and then you'd have to, I wish I hadn't have done that. And so I think it is, and is it something that I would have said face to face? Because that's the other thing, the anonymity of it allows us, particularly in posting in social media, to say things, because if you were face to face with that person, I don't think it would be that rude or harsh. Sure. But maybe it would be, I don't know. But most of the times I don't think so. But yeah, what I have done in those kind of cases is go back through and say, is there anything in here that is defensive? If I'm apologizing to something, if there's a misunderstanding, am I, and you can say this in talking to somebody face to face, am I saying something, am I giving an excuse, am I saying something, or if I'm offering just an apology with no strings attached? Yeah. Because so oftentimes we do that. Mm-hmm. But so let's go back into, at a few points that I put in, where they go, in order it is. So the first one that I talked about was practice mindfulness before speaking. And, do you have any mindfulness techniques, that you do intentionally, or, because it seems like you're doing some sort of, maybe whether it's unintentional, those are what they are anyway. If you're waiting on sending out an email, that's a mindfulness technique. I think a lot of it is, I don't know that I would ever consider them techniques. I don't know that I would write it as here are the easy steps, but I've just always kind of grown up trying to be as patient as possible and as even keeled as possible. And when I find myself getting into a space where I feel like my emotion is dictating more than my own brain, that's when I try to pull myself back and go, okay, what am I really either mad about, frustrated about, and then come back to it and go, what am I trying to accomplish with this email more so than anything, or this text, or whatever it is. Our conversation.
Yeah, or exactly, a full conversation. What am I actually trying to accomplish out of that? If I'm wanting something to change, am I offering help, or am I just saying, this sucks, you suck, and because that doesn't help things either. I can't just expect things to fix themselves. Yeah,
I have developed some over the years, and it's mostly where I've heard in seminars or read somewhere, or whatever. Because I have struggled with that. Of having taking a beat, taking deep breaths. And it's kind of like breathing in the Holy Spirit and breathing out that toxicity. Time to, because left to my own devices, I will fall into what I would call all or nothing thinking.
Yeah.
where it's all about this, and it's usually there's some compromise in the middle.
Right.
And so I think those practices can be helpful in our communications and in taming our tongue or not letting our tongue become a fire that gets out of control.
I actually, as you were talking, one more thing did hit me, and I do have a couple of people in my world too that I try to talk to if I feel a certain way, and ask them like, is this a valid thing, or
Right.
am I that I trust that would say like, hey, this is you're a little out of line here. You know what I mean? Like that I know would call me to the carpet if I need to be called to the carpet.
Sure.
Like, so I guess it's not necessarily a personal technique, but that is something I would recommend is if you have a couple people in your world that you trust just to tell you the honest truth, not always the truth that you want to hear, but the honest truth when you come up across frustrating situations or when you want to say something that feels angry. I mean, because I think you said it well in the sermon and maybe a little bit earlier as well, is that there are times you have to have hard conversations
Sure.
and need to say things that aren't going to be received well or popular. And that can even be a sign of love just as much as saying something like very positive and uplifting, but it needs to be said in the right way.
Well, yeah, I think what we're talking about is civil discourse, which is an art that I think our culture in general has lost.
Yeah.
About how do we have civil discourse? Because there are going to be times when we're going to have to speak with people with which we disagree with,
Right.
and have completely different, and we may never reach a solution, but I do think we can that can be done in a way that values the other person and honors God.
For sure.
And that's where I would say when we don't honor God, when we devalue the other person. And a lot of the discourse that we see today, and that was part of what I was driving in. We had a lot in the service today. I had to
It was a busy service.
cut some of the stuff short. But and part of the reason of choosing to do this sermon at this time was getting into this next month. I see so much of and I have to watch myself as well, is being drawn into my own corner or my own silo where I'm only hearing the voices that I want to hear. And a lot of those voices and a lot of those things that are being said in ways just that make me angry.
Yeah.
And it devalues the other side, and it's like some of it's based on half truths, or you don't have the whole story, and it leads us into a very unhealthy, toxic place. And the scripture this morning, it ended with us talking about fresh water and salt water they don't come out of the same spring.
Yeah.
And so if that's happening to us, you got to realize there's something within us. The quote I used was, the scary part about toxic talk is that it reveals the character of our inner identity. And so even if we're in our own corner with our own crew and we've got all this toxicity about the other side going on, I do think that's revealing something about our character. If we're not the ones to step up in the situation and say, like, wait, those are God's children too.
Yeah.
They're not all evil. They're not all, and so much of it is, it's just demonizing the other side.
Yeah.
And that should bother us a lot in the church more than I see it happening.
Yeah. Honestly, I wonder if it's because it happens quite often. I'm not necessarily saying here, but it does happen quite often in churches that you have people who feel so much about a certain way, and if you don't agree with it or you don't come beside it, that it's a vilifying situation anyway. But I wonder if that's why it doesn't get called out more amongst people in church.
Yeah,
because I don't think people would articulate it that way necessarily, but I wonder if that happens quite often.
Well, I think there's part of church people too that don't like confrontation.
Yeah.
And so I think those who have that gentle spirits, who may be bothered by it, it's not their nature to stand up.
Right.
And it is kind of like, if you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all.
Yeah.
And when do we speak truth in those situations? Say, hey, this is not appropriate.
Yeah.
That we are demonizing these people in that way.
Yeah.
And it also maybe we tend to agree with it. It's going like,
Sure.
yeah, I wouldn't have put it that way, but yeah, you got a point.
Yeah. Not
So,
totally wrong.
so yeah, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard, and that's why I think in the skit we had a skit today too. But
Yep.
I think it talked about how many verses in the Bible speak to this very thing about how we use our language. A lot in Proverbs. James addresses it quite a bit in that letter, and then Jesus talks about it a lot too. So, we need to, Jesus said, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so I think if we are in the Word, if we're in prayer, if we are really seeking to love God, love others, do justice, be those kind of people, then we'll see that. And then there's got to be grace involved too, because we just, part of the longer text today talked about like no one can tame the tongue.
Yeah.
And so it feels a little self-defeating, but at the same time, I get it too, because as much as we think we can, we can't. And so we got to give ourselves grace for those times when we fail.
Right.
And we got to give others when people, and as I've matured, I've done that too. I mean, I've seen around the office, I've seen people snap and do things and go like, that's not them. I know them. They're having a bad day. This is obviously very frustrating to them. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to react to that. I really want to know what's going on with that person.
Yeah, I think the quote's cool with the out of the abundance of the heart, because it kind of it reminds me another basic thing, but it reminds me that when I am at my best in terms of like being patient, being able to discern, I find it goes very much in collaboration with how my personal time with Jesus is going, how my prayer life is. Like I find those as core elements of like keeping me centered in a space where I can feel like I am more in control of my tongue, not necessarily fully tamed, because that would mean like I don't have to do anything. Like it'll just do itself. But I find that that's the place where, and it kind of reminds me also that, I think what we put into us is what's going to come out of us. So if we're just surrounding ourselves with negative people, we're going to be more negative. That's going to be coming out, because that's going to be the stuff that we're kind of filling our bodies with. Yeah.
And just some final thoughts on this. And I'm just going to refer back to something I talked about a little bit earlier, but just to kind of dig down a little bit more on, is that, we are going to have hard conversations at times. Sometimes we're going to have to tell people things they don't want to hear. And so I think the verse from Proverbs that talks about the tongue has the power of life and death. How are we going to, and I think those take some prayerful, thoughtful ways if we're going to have those hard conversations, are how we approach those with people, knowing that it might not be received well. But I think God will bless us for our due diligence and thinking about how are we going to say that, and offering it as life.
Yeah.
Not in a way that shames people. We should never shame people, but a way in which they can be called to any kind of repentance they might have, or I've had conversations with people, and I'm not letting myself up as a perfect example. I have had conversations with people where I said like, that really hurt me, and I want to say why. Yeah. That's kind of opened up a conversation. I've had a really bad day today, and this is how you've contributed to it. Right. I think if you can do it in a way, and what I would ask people to reflect on is when people have done that in a kind way, in a hopeful, healing kind of way to you, offered you critique, offered you, kind of set you straight on some ways in which you might have misspoke, or your actions might have caused harm. Yeah. How have people said that to you in a way that you've been able to receive it? And so when we do that and offer that back to someone else. Yeah. Yeah. I think when somebody, even some of the hardest things I've ever been told, when somebody comes at it from a space of like love and care,
there are times that I have been defensive, but at the end of the day, like when because I'm a reflector, so when I reflect back on it, it actually showed me how much more that person loved me to tell me the hard thing than not. You know what I mean? So I think when you can come at it in a space, a thoughtful space, a space that doesn't just feel reactionary and stuff like that, you're going to communicate as well as you can.
Yeah. So this is a sermon, in some ways that is.
I think you downplayed it at the beginning,
yeah,
saying that this is too basic. I think this is something we
yeah.
are constantly working on.
What I think I meant by that was that like this is, you've heard this before.
Yeah.
I feel like I've even preached a lot of this before, maybe in a different way, taking it from a different angle. I mean, I know I have.
Yeah.
But I think I have at Hickory Flat.
Right.
And so, and I think it's something we need to hear often because it's something we all struggle with. So it is one of those basic things that we're just going to have to keep on working on
for sure
to get right. And so won't be the last we hear of it. But something that we haven't heard a lot of will be the next sermon series.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking for the time of October, we need something a little different.
Okay.
I hope it will be fun.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be looking at some stories from the Bible that if you're familiar with them, and maybe some of them you aren't familiar with, but if you read that, you would go like, why in the world is this in the Bible? Or
there's a few of
why
those.
is this story, why is it included, the story where Paul is preaching and somebody gets so bored they go asleep and fall out of a window?
Yeah.
I mean, why did that get included? So we're going to look at some of those kinds of stories in I think it's called Stranger Stories.
Okay.
And that's what we're going to be doing in the month of October. So I think it's going to be fun. I think it'll be fun for us to do podcasts on as well.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
A lot of more storytelling kind of sermons. So got that coming up, and got a busy October here at Hickory Flat.
Busy October, and as you said that, we won't give you a whole list of announcement type things, but just real quick is we are doing a pumpkin patch here. If that is something you're interested in helping sell. If you're interested in helping being on the team that helps sell the pumpkins and stuff like that, we'd love to have you. We got a lot of spots still to fill for the whole month. We do sell, and all that money goes back into the church that we raised from that. To last year we did children and youth ministries. I think this year we're doing something similar, but to love to have you come join us with that. We also are unloading the pumpkins next Sunday. So wear your overalls to church, get your work gloves.
I don't have any overalls. Do we have to wear overalls?
You don't. You can t-shirt,
wear
jeans,
clothes that would be appropriate to
whatever you feel like.
Okay.
I'm not discriminatory. You want to be out there in a dress, you can go for it, but I would not recommend.
Yeah.
But yeah, come on out, come join us, take some pumpkins off the trailer. We have a little event going on with it as well, where there'll be a cakewalk and some relay races. It'll be a lot of fun. So come hang out with us, come join us. Dave, do you have anything else to close us here?
No, this has been good. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks. We'll
Well,
see
you guys know where to drop the comments if you have any. And other than that, we hope you have a good rest of your day.
All right.
We'll catch you next time.
God bless everybody.